You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Hello, everybody. Al Bielawski with another edition of our beautiful Catholic faith and the supernatural aspects of it, where we talk about the miracles, the supernatural, the mysticism of our faith, as well as relevant topics to our Catholic faith. And today I think we'll have an interesting show for you because we're going to talk about evolution and a little bit of the Enlightenment and some things that are related to what many people don't like to talk about in these subjects, whether it be the evolution and the age of reason and the supernatural war that we are in, because people either tend to downplay the supernatural aspect of this war that is between God and Satan and Christ followers and those that follow Satan, his demons. And that mystical aspect that St. Paul talks about in Holy Scripture about our battle not being of flesh and blood, but powers and principalities of the darkness of this world. And people want, especially today, to throw that aspect out, to rely more on our reason, on our science, in the technology that we are living in, rather than talk about that foolish old superstition that was around in the medieval ages. And this is a grave mistake, because, like it or not, these problems that we have had since the fall, when Adam and Eve chose to disobey their Creator, and at every epoch of our civilization, in every corner of this globe, there has been this battle between good and evil. The battle to do what is right, what is good, against what is bad and evil. And we're certainly seeing that play out now. And these are critical times, make no mistake about it. The battle and the heat are being turned up. And we can poo-poo this idea and call it silly superstition, whatever you want, but there's something going on here. And to shortchange the supernatural aspect of this, again, is a grave mistake. For Jesus said something in Scripture, and for those listening that do not believe in Scripture, do not believe this supernatural aspect, just approach this show tonight with an open mind, and to acknowledge that there are severe problems here. I think most of us would agree. There's this discord, there's this incredible confusion, hatred, not love in our hearts. And it seems to be this confusion, this disruption, this division reaching to a head each and every day, growing more. Not dialogue, but dissension. Division, not discourse. And a house divided will not stand. So these are important things. And Jesus said that the prince of this world was the devil. So if we look at it from that fact, we can see many things that seem to be unexplainable, no reason or rhyme to them in our actions, in our behavior, what's going now on in society. We can begin to see this in a more logical sequence. Now, what does this have to do? As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, the topic's going to be with evolution and the Enlightenment. And we're going to concentrate on the evolution part of this today, because when we look at the age of reason and we look at some of the players whether it be Voltaire, and we look at Charles Darwin, and we see Rousseau, these free thinkers, these inspired people, that it laid a foundation, especially with the origin of the species, to throw out the supernatural and God, to put man above this. Now remember, in this time period of these centuries between the 16 and 1800 years of 1800, free thinkers were looked upon as the cat's meow. They were put on a pedestal. And we see that even today. You know, you may discuss things with people, and today you're probably more arguing with them, sad to say. And one thing I've noticed is that people like to use the word, we're enlightened now. Well, they were enlightened centuries ago during the Age of Reason. And a lot of stuff happened during that Age of Reason. Not all of it, of course, is bad, but some of it was. You know, when man takes God out of the equation, when he throws him out of his public domain and wishes to be God himself, then we are going to create an atheistic secular philosophy that in the past has shown us to great destruction, great carnage, and a lot of suffering, a great deal of suffering. And when mankind looks at himself as only a material thing and not a spiritual being created by God, then any type of behavior, any type of policies, in man's opinion and in man's eyes, for those who are in power at that particular time, can be incorporated and justified. And usually for the people that are not in power and subjugated under that power, it's not a good thing. And there's a great deal of confusion in our society now, where a lot of people feel that evil has become good and justified and legalized, and that the society is becoming more and more godless. And people are putting, especially in this country, people that do not have a religious foundation into power. And man will fill that vacuum with his own ideas. And again, it has not worked out well historically for us. But anyway, let's get on to this main topic, and we'll try to tie this up together. Now, Darwin, again, when he wrote The Origin of Species, and with these free thinkers, and then put on a pedestal, we can see that this opened the door, that this scientific evidence in free-thinking circles led the way to a modernity that wasn't based on a spiritual nature, but of a materialistic one. And with these free thinkers, it fell into the place then that if we can get rid of the Bible and critique the Bible and take out sections and prove that the Bible is nothing but a bunch of myths and fairy tales, then we are well on our way to becoming free. Free and liberated from God and the commandments that He, in their thinking, imposed to restrict our freedom as slaves, and we must break free of that. Now remember, this is some of the ideas that they come upon each other, where it started in the Age of Reason and led to something like the French Revolution, that led to a tie between Darwinism and the origin of the species, that then can lead to Karl Marx, who embraced these philosophies, and the destruction of communism. And we cannot separate Karl Marx from communism, because they are inextricably linked. And communism, as the Virgin Mary of Fatima said, if she spread her errors, which she has, would be catastrophic, which it has been. So all these things led up to man breaking away from his God, breaking away from his Creator in a way that was shaped and framed that you would be free. Free from the responsibility of God, His commandments, and the church He started. Now, today, you have people that push back on evolution, and they get it with both barrels. The scientific community, if you read some of the articles or read some books, they talk about creationists as with venom, with a great deal of venom. And when you look at now, we'll take this from a Catholic perspective, because it's not just right-wing, radical fundamentalist, evangelical Christians that these extremist charges are leveled at. Because there's a group of scientists who are creationists and are Roman Catholic. And this is interesting, because when we look at our faith, our Catholicism, it seems that, and is assumed, that it has accepted evolution as a fact and actually incorporated it into its theology. And that's what we would call theistic evolution, that God uses evolution in the process to bring about life. And some popes have given, the evolutionary theory a go, and for most Catholics, that will have settled the matter. Now, just one thing. The popes, when they express this, it is their opinion. And it's not as from the chair of Peter, ex cathedra, where in matters of moral and faith, we as Catholics believe they're infallible, such as the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception, and the glorious Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary, the two times these have been used. So we've got to be careful with that, because as a follower, as a Catholic, if one of the popes gives an opinion, it doesn't mean you're required to believe it, as in those doctors from the chair of Peter's in matter of morals and faith. It's a big difference. And there are many, well, let's just say that argument doesn't apply everywhere. And there are qualified scientists that are Catholic, who profess our faith, who disagree with evolution. And we need to recognize that. Because, again, we have great people like Father Spitzer in the Magis Society that do great things. So we've talked about this on other shows before, that science and religion do not have to have this, headbutting. They can be joined together. But it seems, again, when it comes to evolution and the creationists, there's venom. There's a great deal of venom. So let's take a look at some of the things that we can look at. So we'll take a look at what a very well-known scientist who did papers and research on sedimentology. His name was Guy Berthold. And some of the work that he did was very damaging to the evolutionary theory. Now, obviously, when you look at Berthold's work and see what he wrote, he was against the society flow, the norm. So he came under criticism. And you can check out some of his replies to some of the critics at his time because they're brilliant. So this is no slouch as a scientist. And what he did was give an alternative flood model explanation to the geology of the Earth that didn't require millions of years of gradual erosion and sedimentation. And he actually performed these experiments in a laboratory of what happens to mixed sediments in flowing water. And you might have considered that something that other geologists at the time would have done since it's a basic. And what inspired Berthold was when he was doing this, he found, he was surprised, that no such experiments had been done. So he decided to do that. And what he found was these experiments were amazing when they were set against the accepted geological model. And that's what some scientists attacked him on. Because his research, Berthold's, found that multiple layers of strata could be laid down by water flow both vertically and horizontally at the same time. Now, the theory of evolution, according to Berthold, was formulated by Darwin, claims that the fossil record shows that organisms transform into different species over long periods of time that are expressed in the geological timescale. Now, it's important to notice that geology and Darwin's theory of evolution had to complement each other or they would have fallen. So Darwin's theory without the geology couldn't have been written. So we've got to look at that. Now, when we look and see some of the things for reasons against, which we're going to go into in a minute here, for evolution, and again, some of this, we'll talk about the geology, we're more on Berthold's experiments. And we can see that with this theory of evolution, we have a couple problems. Now, one thing we can look at is that there is no empirical proof that we know of where macroevolution exists. And what that means is that one organism becomes another through evolution. So that's a big difference in what we are told in the theory of evolution. And we want to report that this is a theory yet. It's not the facts of evolution, it's still a theory. And so this evidence that one organism changed to another and is occurring at the present or has ever happened in the past, we have no proof of that. And actually, to go a step further, if you want to look at through our recorded history, no one has ever seen it. Now, some point out that a new species of fruit fly points to that, but that would be what they call microevolution, not macro, because the fruit fly, even it's still a fruit fly. albeit different. It didn't become, say, a bird. And the formation, again, of any new species by any mechanism whatsoever has never been observed. So that's one problem that some people that do not believe in evolution cite. Now, the other thing that they cite is there are no transitional fossils. And you would think that if evolution, if this species change, if this one organism into another had taken place, you would think there should have been a great many transitional structures in the fossilized form. So they should be in the fossil record, recording the stages of development from that one organism into another type. But we don't have that. And like an example, invertebrates are supposed to transform into vertebrates. And they had to do this by passing through many, many intermediate stages. But the fossil record does not document those transitions. And yet, there are millions, really countless millions of fossils, all of which are non-transitional. Now, most paleontologists find themselves then in facing a situation in which there are what are called gaps in the fossil record, with no evidence of any of that transformational intermediate between these documented fossil species. So the gap has to be filled. So what are they looking for? Missing links, which are missing. And not only are those links missing, but professional evolutionists now admit they cannot even imagine how one species could be linked with one another, much or less change into an entirely different one. And they can't identify missing links and cannot devise a testable theory on how these particular episodes of evolution came about. Now, one of them, and it was written in the American Science Review of a book In Search of Deep Time by Henry G., he was adamant that all popular stories about how the first amphibians conquered dry land, then the birds developed wings, then feathers for flying, how the dinosaurs went extinct, and how humans evolved from apes are just products of our imagination that are driven by prejudices and preconceptions. And that's a very interesting point to make, because when I mention the Enlightenment and the origin of species and this couple hundred-year period of enlightenment, which really, if you think about it, we still kind of are in, because, again, people are still using that term in this age of reason where science has become a new God. You have no need for religion anymore. We'll take care of business and create this utopia on earth. And that's what a lot of free thinkers thought, that if they could break free from the chains of God and use that reason, that we could establish a utopia. Don't forget, that was part of the Communist Manifesto, which is interesting when you look at Marx's writings, and Lenin for that fact. They both said that in order to do that and create that utopia, it had to be by blood first. So, I mean, you know, that there should be some warning bells that should have been ringing, but nonetheless. So to get back what I was saying, that prejudice and preconceptions, again, can link back to that type of thinking. And we've got to be careful about that, especially in our day and age today, because to say there are agendas is a great understatement. And one of the things about our Catholic faith and our Christian walk is that if any agenda is done by the church for Christians. It is to lead fellow human beings to eternal salvation and complete joy and happiness with Christ, and to love one's brother as oneself, to try and improve and be good stewards of this creation and creatures on this planet we live called Earth. So the agenda is for one's love of brother for his benefit. And that is a lot different than a lot of other agendas just designed for power. And I know people say, oh, well, the church just wants that power too. The church wants people to go to heaven and to do what is right by their fellow man and to do and live by God's commandments and to make our will one like the Father's. And then we would have happiness and we would have joy, and the conditions in which we live, in which there's so much confusion, disruption, deception, and evil, would change for the better. So if that's an agenda, that's a pretty good agenda. But those are not the ones Mr. G was talking about, or alluded to, or I'm alluding to, with those prejudice and preconception. So again, he says it's an imagination. It's a big stretch. It's a big leap. Okay. We also see no evidence of evolution at the molecular level. Now, even with DNA sequence data, there is no direct access to the process of evolution. So that means that if we're going to reconstruct the past, we're going to have to do it by creative imagination. And that's where the prejudice and preconceptions can get us into trouble. See, because DNA and other genetic evidence as proof of evolution are inconsistent with the fossil record and the comparative morphology of the creatures. Now, we look and we see that even the geological timescale can be questioned. As I mentioned, evolution, the theory of it, depends upon the great age of rocks calculated by the geologic timescale. Now that's why I said that Darwin needed, in that Origin of Species, in his theory, to be tied and linked to the science of geology that had sprung up. And again, the scale, based upon these principles of geology, recently have been invalidated by laboratory experiments. And you can see this with the French Academy of Science did too in 1986 and 88, Geological Society in 93. And it's important to notice that. And if that had been known again back in the 19th century, again, Darwin could not have formulated his theory. He had to rely on geological formation taking millions of years to form. And don't forget, one of Darwin's friends was the geologist Charles Lyell, and he gave those years, those millions of years, in his principles. And these principles now can be refuted. So, that is one of the things with evolution, is that they like to fall back on millions of years. So time is a great ally, because we can fall back and just say that, well, this does happen, but it should take millions and millions of years to happen. So sometimes, you've got to question that, because, that could be too much of a crutch. Now, what we see that new knowledge of geology can allow for the reconstruction of original conditions in which rocks were formed. Now, the original conditions include the time taken for formation. And in reconstructions now, that time is shown to have been in weeks or even days rather than millions of years. That's part of Bertholt's, again, experimentations. And again, remember, when you go against the established norm, you're going to have conflict. So you can expect that. Now, we see, too, that evolution can ignore the law of physics. We see that evolutionary processes can break even the most universal and best proved laws of physics, such as the law of increasing entropy, known as the second law of thermodynamics. And this applies not only in physical chemical systems, but also in the biological and geological systems. In fact, without exception, it's in all systems. And that is simply put that the law of entropy, that all systems tend to lose order. In other words, they go towards disorganization and loss of complexity, not the other way around, where they become organized and complex. And see, that law of physics, then, precludes evolution, because all evolutionary systems are expected to increase in order and complexity. Now, it appears that no exception from physicists such as E.H. Lieb and Jacob Vason, that no exception to the second law of thermodynamics has ever been found, not even a tiny one, they say. They use what's called conservation of energy, the first law, and that the existence of a law so precise and so independent of details of models that they must have a logical foundation that is independent of the fact that matter is composed of interacting particles. Now, despite the above and many other facts, a naturalistic origin of mankind and the cosmos continues to be justified by evolution theory. Now, just make a quick comment on that you can see in what Father Spitzer and that Magus Society say about a fine-tuned universe, that if one thing was just a small degree out of kilter, all we know of this beautiful gift of life could not have happened. That's how fine-tuned the universe had to be for all of this to take place. And in many times, you see that chaos doesn't usually lead to a great benefit. And there's a lot of detrimental effects from chaos. And we may see it in our families. We may see it in our cities, our towns, our nation, our world. And when we try to say that this type of chaos can lead to order and complexity and organization, we can get into trouble. You know, when we look and see that everything evolved, when we take that fact, and if we agree to that, even religion then is just an evolution of mankind's. What happens is we have a massive decline in faith and rampant what? Materialism. When we do have that, when we have this, when we don't have a moral high ground to shoot for, and we just live for the pleasures and the sensations and the comfortability of life, we're going to have an incredible difficulty. And this, again, is because we are spiritual beings. And we have to look at this from that supernatural aspect. Because when we do, we can see this chaos, this disorder, this dissension, and see that we don't have order come out of this. We have tragedy and suffering and a great deal of confusion. And that is a trick of the devil. And make no mistake about it, when we just subscribe to a materialistic world and throw all the supernatural out, people won't believe in the devil. They certainly won't believe in God. They won't believe in the battle of good versus evil. And when we look at that from a material standpoint and just look at achieving comfortability and sensate pleasures, then there is no higher ground. There is no more higher ground. We can justify and use every excuse as human beings to just be concerned about ourselves and what we need and want. And a society like that will be divided, and a society like that will fall. So many things are taught in schools these days about these things that we accept verbatim without questioning through science. And when we let science and other things, other ideologies replace God, we are going to have trouble. Now, going back to the topic, one of the things that is used is that radioactive decay, in effect, are supposed to confirm any stratigraphic chronologies and, in that regard, improve our knowledge of the age of the Earth. So it's pretty cut and dry that through radiocarbon and things like that. Now, the reality is certainly much more complicated. And when taking these examples, science makes assumptions, and make the assumptions for the initial conditions and a final result. And you have to ask, is the experimental method, is it applicable to events of the past? And if that answer is yes, well, what precautions do you take? Because when you look back at radio dating methods, whether it's with rocks or even, the Shroud of Turin, there are many assumptions that are oversimplified. And there's a lack of knowledge of radioactive decay series. There was a lack of knowledge of isotopes. And the simplicity of these models. So when that happens, and these initial conditions are not realistic, what would happen? Well, you have contradictory results. And there are weaknesses, even in improvements that are made in the technique, that from the beginning were never corrected. So results that are discordant with the geological timescale are discarded. And that, what happens then is, for scientists, there's no forum that can formulate objections to the validity of that initial hypothesis. So one hypothesis they have is the validity of a closed system concept. So no exchange, for instance, between rock crystals and the environment. And in particular, if you look, they have potassium-argon method, and they apply it to volcanic rocks that are undergoing certain conditions, hydrothermal conditions, that are far from standard conditions. And they're never included in models of that crystallization between the rock crystals in that particular environment. And if you look and they see, and one gentleman from Grenoble, France, the scientist Jean de Pintaro, what he found was that the crystallization that occurred in liquid or viscous magma trap gases and crystal outgassing during eruption wasn't total. He said that argon-40 in excess is demonstrated in magmatic rocks from recent volcanic eruptions like Mount St. Helens. And the quantity of the argon-40 that was trapped depended on hydrothermal conditions during the solidification and on the structure of the crystal lattice. And those results, he found, explain the systematic and erratic ages obtained from material collected at recent eruption sites. So, again, because of those problems, you can't just concretely say that, radioactive dating is infallible. So, a very interesting point. And, I mentioned that in schools, evolution is taught as a biological fact. And one of the things that you look at in school books is it's based that formations of races were an example of a small step in evolution. Now, that is profoundly wrong. And one of the things they found from scientists in Poland is that races form as a consequence of a genetic drift and selection and isolation. Now, that genetic drift, they found, resulted from the accidental loss of some genetic variation in small populations due to inbreeding. So the selection depended on the elimination from a population of all forms not adapted to that particular environment. And because of that elimination, some gene variants also get lost. So for natural races to be identifiable, they have to remain isolated from the main body of the population. And that is true in breeding, where the particular breeder reproduces the race formation procedure that applies to selection of one's own choice. So macroevolution requires increase of genetic variance. Thus, race formation, which depends on their reduction, is a process in the opposite direction, which is comparable to what they found was an extinction. And just let me repeat that again. So macroevolution, this change that requires an increase of genetic variance. Now, they were lost, what they found. In this, the gene variants were lost, and thus could not have that increase of genetic variance which would depend for this race formation. In fact, it would do the opposite and lead to an extinction. Now, another interesting thing that's taught is positive mutation. That as a mechanism, this leads to new function or organs. And again, this is also undemonstrated. Scientists can demonstrate many neutral and negative mutations, no positive ones. And they claim that the appearance of resistance to man-made chemicals like fungicides, herbicides, antibiotics is evidence of positive mutation is questioned on the ground that it belongs to the multitude of defense mechanisms like healing or acquiring immunity, which defend the existing life function of an organism without creating new ones. So that is already in place. That's not new. That's a defense for healing. And they are already in place, not a new creation. So again, you see that there are scientists that definitely, and these are Catholic, disagree with some of the accepted theories of some of the geologic scale and evolution. And this is not to rip apart scientists or again, anything that would, I don't want to create a division here that it's got to be one or the other. Both are complementary to each other, and they can be. But again, and we see this in our time, that again, there's no dialogue between groups. It either has to be my way or the highway. So we can get good input from each other and good ideas and working solutions to many things if we do not let these prejudices and these divisions take precedence. And that's a hard thing for us to do in our society today, because there is that conflict, and there is that division, and there is that confusion. And again, evolution is accepted by many people, and of course not all people. And again, and as I mentioned, so we can't say it's known to be true and factual, because many people, philosophers, scientists included, certainly do not know it to be true or factual. Therefore, it's a fact. Therefore, it is not a fact that, in that sense, can be accepted. So, no scientific theory, when we look at it, can be proved to be absolutely true, for one thing. And that's why I mentioned that evolution is still a theory. It shouldn't be taught in schools as fact. And I don't see, the attacks either from the creation on scientists and science and creation, again, it's so common in the age we live in. And we need to have good dialogue if we're going to get unity. And brothers and sisters, we need unity. One thing about Darwin's original theory of evolution, and for me this is a suspect thing, is that it's been overtaken and adapted again and again and again, and it's quite unrecognizable. And Darwin was a man of his time. And remember, he had a problem with religion. His father and he did not agree on many things. And while the father was religious, Darwin chose to go the other way. And again, in the age of enlightenment, in the age of reason and the following, free thinkers were thought and put on a pedestal. And as time passes by, we're seeing that he was wrong on many things. And the fossils, for instance, that he expected would absolutely prove his theory are not there. And there are a few evolutionists that, like Golden Eldridge, and there's others, and they're well-respected paleontologists. They say that there are no fossils to prove that evolution occurred. And they state that the fossil evidence does point toward a conclusion, one conclusion, and that's what they describe as status, which means there is no observable change. So we need to look at all these things before we accept, because again, if we look at this from a supernatural battle, and for sake of argument, acknowledge the fact that we are in this war, then you can begin to see the devil's agenda and how he uses all these things to sow the seeds of disruption and confusion and division. Because what did Satan want? Power. He did not want to serve God. He did not want to be obedient to God. And he wanted to have his own kingdom where he could be God. And that is one of the, those are temptations he throws at us even in this day today when we are supposedly so enlightened. And we always have to be on guard. And we must be cautious with that. Very. And I would challenge us to try to have an open heart and mind in looking at that and the times we live with that in mind of the supernatural and the battle between good and evil and God and Satan. So we need to pray about that. We need to ask Jesus to send the Holy Spirit for discernment. And many scientists today, when you look at it, we talked about this early in the show, that no animal, plant, or fish has ever been observed changing from one kind into another. Now, finch beaks into different kinds of finch beaks, that's called microevolution. And that has occurred and been seen to occur. But the point here is that finches are finches, and that's an adaptation. They have these different beaks to be able to survive, to be able to feed, but they are still finches. That's adaptation. That happens in the natural world. Now, saying that dinosaurs changed into birds, that is unproved. That's an unproved inference. Things can change via a mutation through the loss of some once working function, such as sight or flight. But for evolution to use such examples really shows just how bare the cupboard is when push comes to shove. The non-existence of any solid supporting evidence is in fact good evidence against Darwin's theory of evolution. And sadly, because of that theory, coupled with, in this time period of Age of Enlightenment, that it gave a great excuse for man to subjugate man, whether it was eugenics and theories of socialism, communism, the many promised systems of man to fill the vacuum of God, which has been, I repeat, catastrophic for mankind. Man's inhumanity, man, which we can look back and see time and time again. And we need to really, at this time, I think, in our history, in this epoch of our civilization, to come back to our spiritual makeup, to realize we are not God, to humble ourselves with humility, and realize that there is sin out there, and to acknowledge the fact that we are sinners, that we need to have true contrition and sorrow for our sins, and try, through the grace of God, to do better. And to realize, importantly, we need a Savior. We need His grace. And we are not the Savior. And we never will be. And we will never set up a utopia created by man. Because the truth of the matter is, when we strip this all down, is that there is a battle for our souls as human beings. That the devil not only wants to destroy us, but all of God's creatures and creation. Because, as Jesus said, He was a liar and a murderer from the beginning. And that is His goal. But we look at our King, Jesus Christ, who conquered Satan, sin, evil, and death, and has promised us something so much better when we follow the true King, when we have that humility and that humbleness, and realize, yes, Lord, your way is the best way. And we try to let His will be done in our lives. That is how here we can bring about the kingdom of heaven that we pray in our Father on our earth, to let God's will be done as it is in heaven here. And not only that, but then at the end of time, at the end of all history, that those who choose to do it this way, to accept God's gift and His grace, will one day be with Him in paradise, in a dwelling place that He has promised to us. And He would not have said that if He didn't mean it. And that we can count on and take to the bank. So keep the hope, brothers and sisters, for our hope is in the Lord Jesus Christ. And with Him, all things are possible. God bless.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
To a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.